In a small village in India, an 85-year-old farmer lives alone in a modest house, surrounded by the animals he cares for. His name is Mayandi. He keeps to himself, living a quiet and simple life. He rarely speaks and almost never shows what he feels. His days follow a steady rhythm. Every morning he takes his 2 cows out to the fields and works the land with them. By late morning, they return home to rest. Around midday, while the rest of the village is busy with their own routines, Mayandi heads to the market. He buys what he needs, vegetables for himself and feed for his animals. He also plans to buy seeds for his farm, but when he checks the shop, nothing meets his standards. The quality is not what he expects. In the end, he walks away without buying anything, quietly disappointed by how things have changed. On his way home, he meets Ramaya, a polite young man from the village. Ramaya is waiting for the woman he loves, Eswari. He has already asked her to marry him, but she refused because her mother does not approve. This is how life moves in the village. Simple, repetitive, and familiar. Everyone follows their own routine. But the next day, something unusual happens. A tree is struck by lightning during the night, even though there was no rain at all. The villagers are shaken. With a long drought already affecting them, many begin to see it as a sign. The village priest and leader believe it is the anger of the gods caused by the villagers neglecting their prayers at the temple. They call for a festival and offerings to restore balance. However, during the meeting, tension rises. Ramaya's father, who is part of the priesthood, refuses to participate alongside other castes, even though the other priests want to unite for the ritual. Days pass, and the villagers return to their routines while preparing for the ceremony. But Ramaya begins to change. Rumors spread that he has lost his mind. After his proposal is rejected, he learns that Eswari has taken her own life by drinking poison. The news breaks him. From that moment on, Ramaya wanders from one temple to another, searching for answers. His appearance becomes strange. He wears layers of clothing along with excessive jewelry and watches. He can still speak normally, but his actions often feel unpredictable. At times, he lashes out at anyone who mocks or disturbs him. With his strange behavior, the villagers become more convinced that Ramaya has lost his mind. At one point, he lashes out at a friend who tries to drink his tea, then casually sprinkles flour over him before walking away, carrying his bags as if nothing happened. Not long after, Ramaya makes his way to the home of Mayandi. He asks for a place to eat and rest. Mayandi welcomes him without hesitation. He prepares 2 plates of food and listens as Ramaya shares stories about his journey searching for Murugan. Unlike the others, Mayandi treats him with patience and respect, as if nothing is wrong. While the village labels Ramaya as unstable, Mayandi sees him as a person who simply needs care. Ramaya continues his spiritual search, and at one point, his father brings him to the village temple to pray to the gods who protect their land. After returning from the temple, Mayandi's grandson notices another young man nearby, the son of Dhanapandai, bathing an elephant. The family has sold all their land and used the money to buy the animal, choosing a very different path from the rest of the village. The village priest initially approaches Dhanapandi, hoping he can provide the first grains needed for the upcoming ritual. But since the land is gone, that is no longer possible. Now, only Mayandi remains as a farmer in the village. With no other choice, the priest turns to Mayandi for help. At first, Mayandi hesitates. The water in his well is running low and the drought is still ongoing. But seeing that there is no alternative, he agrees to take on the responsibility. The next day, he carefully performs a series of rituals before planting. He prepares the seeds, offers prayers, and blesses his farming tools. Then he heads to the field with his 2 cows and begins working the land. Water is released into the soil and the rice seeds are finally sown. At the same time, Mayandi's grandson and a couple of friends help prepare for the ceremony by collecting clay from the river, which will be used to make traditional pots for the ritual. As time passes, Mayandi's crops begin to grow well. The fields turn green, and everything seems on track for a timely harvest before the ceremony. But just as things start to look hopeful, trouble returns. Property developers approach Mayandi once again, offering him a large amount of money for his land. It is not the first time they have tried. Each offer is higher than the last, but Mayandi has always refused. For him, the land is not something to sell. It is his way of life. Without it, he would lose his purpose. No matter how tempting the offer becomes, he stands firm and refuses to give it up. The following day, when Mayandi arrives at his field, he finds several peacocks lying dead on his land. He looks at them with deep sadness, believing they are sacred animals, the very vehicle of the god Murugan. With care, he buries them in a nearby part of his land, honoring them in the only way he knows. While he is burying the peacocks, a villager happens to see him and reports it to the local police. Peacocks are protected animals, recognized as the national bird of India, so the situation quickly becomes serious. That night, Mayandi returns home and spends some time talking with Ramaya. He shares what he found in his field, the dead peacocks, and how he buried them. Ramaya believes it is all part of a greater plan from Murugan. The next day, while Mayandi is working in his field, the police arrive to investigate the report. He calmly shows them where the peacocks were buried. Not long after, he is taken into custody and brought to the station without much resistance. The officers accuse him of killing the birds and burying them, relying only on a witness who saw him at the scene. The accusation feels rushed and unfair, and the village elders step in, hoping to secure his release. It is then revealed that years earlier, a similar incident had happened in the same village. A peacock had been killed, and when investigators came, they were blocked from doing their job. The police never forgot that humiliation. This time, with Mayandi admitting that he buried the birds, they see an opportunity to settle that old score. Using the witness statement as support, they push the case forward and bring it to court, keeping the old man in custody. That night, Mayandi is forced to stay in jail. He is told that the village elders will come for him the next day, but the news of his arrest spreads quickly and leaves many people saddened, especially those close to him. At the hearing the following day, Mayandi waits for his turn. When his name is called, he does not respond to the judge's questions. It soon becomes clear that he has hearing difficulties, so someone from the village is appointed to help communicate on his behalf. Through the mediator, Mayandi explains that he would never harm the peacocks, as he believes they are the sacred vehicle of the god Murugan. He only buried them after finding them already dead in his field. The judge listens carefully and begins to see the truth. It becomes clear that Mayandi is a victim of a misunderstanding. She immediately calls in the police inspector responsible for the case, questioning the false report and the altered details that do not match what actually happened. Although she declares Mayandi not guilty, the process cannot be reversed instantly. The report still needs to be corrected, and until then, Mayandi is ordered to remain in jail for 15 days. He wants nothing more than to return home and take care of his land and animals, but the decision stands. As a temporary solution, the judge assigns a police officer to look after his crops while he is detained. Back in the village, his relatives pray at the temple, asking for protection and guidance. But the officer assigned to the field fails to do his job properly. The crops are neglected. At the same time, Mayandi's grandson struggles to care for the livestock, lacking the experience needed to manage everything. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Mayandi tries to make himself useful. He begins teaching other inmates the basics of farming. It is the only thing he can do while his thoughts remain fixed on the condition of his land back home. Meanwhile, back in the village, people stay busy preparing for the upcoming ritual. Clay pots are shaped and dried, and every detail is carefully handled. But Ramaya continues his journey, moving from one temple to another, from one hill to the next, still searching for Murugan. After 15 days pass, Mayandi is still not released. The police inspector deliberately delays correcting the report, forcing him to remain in prison longer. Back home, his land begins to suffer. The officer assigned to care for it does not have the knowledge or discipline to manage the crops properly, and the field slowly falls into neglect. Seeing this, Mayandi's grandson cannot stand by any longer. Worried about the condition of the farm and the disappointment his grandfather would feel, he steps in to help. He tries to take care of the land himself and even sends updates to Mayandi. But instead of relief, the news only deepens Mayandi's concern, especially as the young plants begin to dry out. At the same time, another villager, the elephant owner, quietly holds an important truth. He knows who is really responsible for the dead peacocks that led to Mayandi's arrest. The act was carried out by people who had been trying to buy Mayandi's land, but kept facing rejection. Their greed had pushed them to take extreme measures. The following day, village elders travel to a neighboring area to invite others to join the ritual, a sign that the ceremony is drawing closer. But for Mayandi, things only get worse. His detention is extended by another 15 days due to the inspector's continued delay. Now he faces a full month behind bars. His crops and livestock are left hanging by a thread. Pests begin to attack the fields, making the situation even more critical. His grandson visits him again, explaining what is happening, and receives advice on how to handle the infestation using traditional methods, including a mixture made from cow urine and natural plants. The grandson manages to gather most of the ingredients, but one key element is missing: Neem leaves cannot be found anywhere. Without it, the solution fails. The pressure begins to weigh on him, and guilt starts to surface. He realizes that the troubles his grandfather is facing are tied to something he did a year earlier. It turns out that he was the one responsible for killing a peacock in the village back then, along with a friend. The truth finally catches up to him. Overwhelmed, he decides to turn himself in and pleads for his grandfather's release, even offering to take his place. But the judge cannot accept that. The law does not work that way. Although she feels sympathy for their situation, she can only ask them to wait for the process to be completed. After that, the grandson leaves for another village, entrusting the task of preparing the traditional pest solution to a friend. Meanwhile, far from home, Ramaya continues his spiritual journey. Along the way, he begins to gain new understanding from each place he visits. During one of his travels, he meets a priest who offers him food and a blessing. The blessing is not only for Ramaya but also for the woman he loves, even though she is no longer alive. For Ramaya, this moment brings comfort. For the first time, someone else acknowledges the presence of the person he still believes is with him. Back in the village, a mistake makes things even worse. The friend of Mayandi's grandson, who was supposed to find neem leaves, ends up buying pesticide instead. And not just any pesticide, but one that has already expired. Somehow Mayandi seems to sense that something is wrong. While still in prison, his condition begins to weaken, and he develops a mild fever. The next day, he grows increasingly restless, unable to stop thinking about his land and what might be happening to it. When his grandson returns from his trip, he shares what he experienced, including his encounter with Ramaya and a small bundle he intends to give to Mayandi. That moment is marked by the sudden cry of a peacock nearby, echoing loudly. Not long after Ramaya disappears. For a brief moment, the grandson thinks he might have fallen, but it quickly becomes clear that he is simply gone. Later, Mayandi describes it in his own way, believing that Ramaya has moved on to another place. That night, after hearing the story, Mayandi cannot sleep. His mind is overwhelmed with thoughts about Ramaya, his failing crops, and the upcoming ceremony. The following day, he is taken to court again, but since the judge has not yet arrived, Mayandi asks for a chance to return home, even if just for a moment, to see his land. With the help of his relatives, he quietly slips away. What he finds is devastating. His entire field is ruined. The crops have died before they could ever be harvested. He stands there in silence, crushed by the sight, unable to say a single word. Soon after, the police take him back to court. When he enters the courtroom, his head remains lowered. The weight of everything is visible. The judge acknowledges the failure of the assigned officer and expresses regret for what has happened. The hearing concludes, and Mayandi is finally allowed to go home once the paperwork is completed. Outside, his grandson argues with his friend over the damage to the crops. Meanwhile, the release process drags on. It takes so long that Mayandi ends up falling asleep while waiting. When the judge later finds him, he cannot be woken up. An ambulance is called immediately. One of the inmates who had learned farming from Mayandi sees him and breaks down, believing the worst. But Mayandi is still alive. Relieved, the judge decides to accompany him to his field, along with several officers. When they arrive, something unexpected happens. The land is no longer empty. Villagers have gathered together, working side by side, planting seeds across the field. It turns out the judge arranged for them to come and help, so the harvest could still be completed in time for the ceremony. Thanks to their effort, everything comes together just in time. The harvest is saved, and the offering ceremony takes place as planned. The elephant owner also joins in, using his elephant to help with the preparations. The entire village works as one, bringing everything together for the ritual. The festival begins, full of life and celebration. In the middle of it all, one of Mayandi's grandchildren gets married. From morning until night, the joy never fades. And for the first time in a long while, Mayandi can finally be seen smiling, standing among his people, watching his land and his life come back together. And with that, the story comes to an end. So the moral of the story is sometimes the kindest people suffer the most, and by the time the world realizes they were innocent, their heart is already too tired from carrying everyone else's mistakes.